Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's one of the creepiest, eeriest feelings you ever had while hiking in the woods? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Last week, my SO and I were hiking in this semi-secluded location in Big Sur, California. There's a hike that leads to a waterfall. We climbed to the top of the waterfall and then rock hopped back through the river. It was gorgeous and I loved it. There were little rocky embankments along the river here and there, and about a mile back in the middle of nowhere, there was just a giant-ass pentagram, at least 6 feet in diameter, filling one of the embankments. I took a picture, and then we turned around and headed back. Don't know if this counts, as I live quite near a wooded area, but I can remember one particular period of time after or during a gaming binge, and it started about 10 p.m., but it started with loud scratching on the walls and eventually on the roof, with loud movement in those areas quite consistently in short bursts, but with no growls of any kind. Now, for context, I live in a cabin on my folks' property that has solid walls and no roof cavity, so that would mean it had to be outside regardless. The same series of noises occurred a few times each hour and continued until 3 a.m. the next morning, where it abruptly stopped. The next morning, about 11 a.m., I checked the exterior, and there was no damage to the walls whatsoever. What makes this story weird is 3 things. 1, I live in Australia, and we don't have any large animals that could do that. 2, my dog in the cabin with me could hear it as well and seemed worried. 3, we are rural and have no close neighbors. To this day, I still don't know what it was. My friend told me that he went into the woods once when I was 11 years old. He noticed 2 things. First was a wood plank with a nail out of it. The second was a bag. He goes near the bag and a foul odor greets him. He decides to open the bag and sees some skin. He decides not to look even further and get out of there and the forest. He has then convinced himself that the body in the bag was an animal and not a human, and has only told me and another friend this story. I should add that he lived in a very bad neighborhood. Not my story, but my mom's. She wanted to hike up the mountain we live on for fun one day. It was probably around 9 to 10 p.m., so it was pitch black, but she wanted an adventure. Right at the top of the mountain, she found a bike with a water bottle on it right in the middle of the trail. The entire hike, she had not seen a soul, so she was confused as to why a bike was there. She looked around for ages for someone who could have possibly owned the bike, but found nobody. She called out for people, but nobody answered. She looked for about 10 or so minutes, she told me. Eventually, her curiosity took over, and she went right up to the bike. She then saw a backpack that she hadn't seen before just sitting at the bike. Again, nobody was within miles around. Keep in mind that it's now about 11 p.m. or so it's pitch black on top of this mountain. Eventually, she was too creeped out about it and came down the mountain. But it's still so weird and eerie that there was nobody around and the backpack had just suddenly appeared. Well, I think this was definitely the creepiest thing I've ever. I was on a DOFE expedition a while back, and we were all starting to get very tired. And we noticed it was starting to get very dark, so we decided to stray off the route and find a quicker way to the campsite. The way we chose took us through an extremely boggy road. I did DOFE cycling back then, so this kind of stuff was extremely difficult. As we went on, it started pouring down. We quickly spotted a broken down barn that still had its roof slightly intact. So we decided that would be the best place to be and stopped off there to try and wait out the storm. As we were chatting about how crap this experience had been so far, I noticed something to the side of me. It was a door, and I know what you're thinking. It's just a door, nothing wrong with it. Well, that's where you're wrong. It seemed put out of place with the barn as it looked refurbished, and it had a huge padlock on it. The padlock didn't look rusted. No, it looked brand new. I just thought coincidence, till I took a closer look and realized that on the door, spray painted on there, was a sign saying free candy. Well, that did it to me, and I told my friend to look at this point. We got freaked out, so we informed the rest of our group, what was happening. However, instead of picking up our bikes and leaving, one of us decided to basically act like they weren't scared. So they went up to the door and knocked on it 3 times. At this point, me and my friend were ready to get out of there, and I am never going to forget this, as 3 knocks sounded instantly after that boy knocked on it 3 times, and they weren't short, separate knocks. Oh no, they were in a beat. I instantly bolted out of there with my friend, with the others not too close behind. It was definitely the scariest moment of my life. One that sticks out is this one time my friends and I were doing what we call man versus wild, where we would go out and try to survive the night in the woods by our high school. So my friends went exploring and left me with one other friend. 30 to 40 minutes go by, finding out later, and my friends decided to roll a huge rock down the hill not too far from the campsite. Kind of freaked my other friend and me out, but whatever. Another half hour goes by after not returning our calls, and by exploring friends call us up and tell us not to ask questions, put out the fire, grab our shit, and bail. My friends and I were skeptical, but we did what they said. We got about halfway out of the woods, and I see lights coming down the trail. My friend and I got about 20 feet off the trail, off a small hillside, and hoped this shit would pass. I shit you not, these guys had an SUV, something like a small Jeep, stopped perpendicular to where we were and talked to themselves for a couple of minutes and left. I have no idea what they were doing or looking for. It could have been a misunderstanding, but it was a effing thrill. Not too eerie, just weird. When I was a teenager, I was hiking alone and coming down this mountain trail right next to a town half an hour or so from the bottom. The sun had recently set, and it was getting dim. I come around a bend and see a bright light coming from the ridge above me. At first I thought it was a forest fire, but it wasn't that bright, and it was cold with snow on the ground in places, so I was pretty confused. So I go off trail to investigate and come across this random raging bonfire, maybe the size of a few pellets, with no other signs of life around. I hung around for a minute, trying to find people and putting snow on it, which didn't do anything. I ended up just leaving it there. Since the ground was all frosted over, I figured it would be fine. There was no threat, but I, my little brother, and Dad went up to the White Mountains of New Hampshire in the summer of last year from New Jersey. I specify from New Jersey because New Jersey is the most densely populated state, and going from that to the third most isolated place on the East Coast really took a toll on me, especially since you couldn't receive good Wi-Fi up there and you can't see more than 20 feet in front of you with that darkness. Left me scared to be alone for multiple months after because of that horrible feeling of isolation. My girlfriend and I were hiking in the Dawson National Forest to a waterfall that is one of the sister falls to the Amicalola Falls here in North Georgia. This particular waterfall isn't well known and definitely nowhere near as popular as the tourist destination Amicalola Falls. We hiked about 1 mile in when we came across a man and his dog at a campsite. It appeared he was living there. As we passed his tent, he came out and yelled, "Do y'all have any food, like energy bars or something?" We didn't, so we said no and kept walking. We were a little bit freaked out, honestly, and I kept looking behind us as we hiked. At the time, I did have the Judge handgun in my jacket pocket, so I wasn't ever too worried about being attacked. Being 2 women, though, always made us a target. We talked about the man on the way to the waterfall and how we felt sorry for him and the dog. On the way back through, past his tent, we just waved at him, kept walking. Deciding that he was harmless enough, my girlfriend and I went several miles to the nearest town to the grocery store. We purchased $100 worth of food and dog food for them. Then we made the long drive back out to the trail and the mile hike carrying the groceries to his campsite. He seemed very grateful and asked us if he could pray with us. I didn't get creeped out till then. He reached his hands out to hold ours. I declined to hold his hand and reached into my jacket, placing my hand on my gun in case he made a sudden movement. He bowed his head and prayed while my girlfriend held his hand. I kept my head up and eyes open the entire time. thinking this was a ploy to get us vulnerable. Nothing happened and we left. A couple of years passed by and we never thought anything about it again until one day we saw a man on the television wanted for the murder of Meredith Emerson. It was the man we brought groceries to, Gary Hilton. A serial killer lived in the woods, killing hikers. Still can't believe we got out unharmed. Maybe he saw the gun, or maybe he appreciated the food, who knows. All I know is no good deed goes unpunished. My boyfriend and I decided to go for a hike 3 hours away from where we live in a different state. As the day of the hike grew closer, we noticed that it had a decent chance for stormy weather all day. We took our chances and still left for the hike. Luckily, it was only raining for the first part of the hike, and it didn't rain until we were leaving to drive home. We went on a trail that was insanely rocky and steep. Looking back, it was probably the worst trail to go on because everything was wet and slick, but we didn't think about it then. There was a mountain in the middle of the trail. On our way up the mountain, we saw a singular bare footprint. It looked like a human footprint. The dirt was soft and easily imprinted from the rain, so the footprint had to have been from that day. The rain would have washed it away if we hadn't been for a few hours prior. You could count 5 toes on it and see the indentations that are compatible with a human foot climbing a steep mountain. No one else was on the trail with us. No one was ahead of us either. The trail was also extremely rocky. Whoever did the footprint could not have gotten up the rocks without shoes. It would have destroyed their feet. I felt like I was being watched before we found the footprint, but I chalked it up to being in the middle of the woods and animals watching me. Now I'm wondering if someone could have actually been staring at me. Well, the rain and the washing away of the footprint notwithstanding, when I think about the foot, the only thing I could think about would be some of those Vibram shoes where it's like the 5-toed shoe. I did some trail running in those a while back. I didn't love them, but some people swear by them, so maybe that was it. Or, maybe Bigfoot. I've got several of these, some of which I'll toss aside since they occurred in salt marshes just off very populated areas. When I was 6, my family owned a fair bit of land around one of the most popular springs in the area. As long as my mom or dad came with me, I was free to trot off into the woods. Well, one day my dad is home and off we go to about. Mostly I just ran around burning off my little kid energy, and that's just what I'm doing. The trees aren't dense, probably about 10 feet between them, but there's a lot of trees, a lot of dead leaves covering the ground, and that haze you get whenever you're deep in the woods. Well, I wind up lost. I'm somewhere on our land I don't recognize. There's trees and leaves as far as the eye can see, and the ground is littered with old, rusted wheels, a bed frame, and other various garbage in no particular order, and it had to have been there a while. Being 6, I do the logical thing and freak out, starting to cry and screaming for my dad. After a minute of this, I hear him shout, "Hold on, don't move, just keep crying, I'm on my way." A few seconds pass, I'm still shouting, and then I hear him say, from what I think is a different direction, "I'm right over here, follow my voice." A few seconds later, "Almost there, just hold on." And then again a few seconds later, "I'm right over here, just come here." This goes on for about a minute, and I break down even more because to me, he's telling me 2 separate things, and I just curl up and cry. He linebackers his way into view, grabs me by the arm and pulls me up. I'm not hurried away or anything, he just calms me down a bit, and then we walk off. I tell him he shouldn't have kept telling me to come to him after saying to stay there, and he tells me he never said that, and that if you're lost in the woods near someone else, the best thing to do is stay put so they can find you. It was never brought up again. When I was in middle school, I was friends with a kid who had an unusual house. For starters, it had a basement. This is effectively considered a bad move in the state of Florida. Weirder yet, cell phones didn't work inside his house at all. And the second you step outside to his front porch or side porch, boom, all your signal is back. Anywhere outside, the signal is back. But his place was cool, and it was built next to an old, dried-up riverbed. It was super fun to play on it, since it was all his parents' property. Naturally, we stayed friends through high school, and his place became the de facto hangout spot for the majority of us, despite the cell phone weirdness. It got significantly creepier, however, once the red eyes started appearing. I have to pause here and fill in this was after the breakthrough of the smartphone, but before apps were commonplace on them. And this meant there were no flashlight apps or anything of the like. Angry Birds didn't exist, and the attached keyboard was the newest craze. You see, his house was literally a couple 100 feet from a major highway, but through just enough trees to dampen the noise of most vehicles. And when most of us had our licenses and started to spend erratic weekends there, the red eyes showed up. They were easily described. Two evenly spaced, small crimson-colored lights that would just appear on the property, often just on the other side of the fence from where we parked, and the very edge of where his floodlights reached. They would linger for a few seconds, abruptly go out, and then appear elsewhere, usually 10 or so feet away, maybe at a different height, and they would do this for an apparently random amount of time and eventually just disappear. They were bright enough that I once decided on the spot I was going home in the morning because I got to his front door and saw them staring at my house through the windshield of my car. They made everyone that saw them nervous and fearful. A couple of my buddies bravely went out at night to try and figure out what it was. I did not go with them, but there were four of them. Probably half an hour later, I and someone else are sitting on the porch getting some fresh air and drinking sodas when they come screaming out of the woods, and rather than take the set of gates, they just jumped the fence immediately. What I was told was they had just gotten out of sight of the house and had been sweeping the area when, as a group, they felt suddenly watched. They heard something rustling through the leaves, and a bamboo cluster began to rattle. They swept the light over the area around them to try and see something, but nothing showed up. Suddenly, part of the cluster just bent and broke, so they hightailed it out of there. They finish relaying the story, and of course we're calling bullshit on them, before the guy sitting with me gets us to look into the woods. There, burning brightly, is the same damned pair of crimson eyes, staring at the house, and then they blink out, come back on, heading toward the gate. Naturally, we F off back inside. We still don't know what caused them, and as a collective, we've seen them probably around 100 times on and off with different groups of people. So the makeup of people was never quite the same. His dad was adamant it was taillights from the road that went through these woods, but we didn't really buy that because we'd been to the road. It's a bridge over the gap where the river used to be, and easily to get there, you have to follow the riverbed, because the trees and vines are denser than it's worth going around them. Even then, it's a 20-ish minute hike to a large fence, the height of the bridge you have to scale, and another couple 100 feet to the bridge itself. There's no effing way you'd ever see the lights of anything that far out, and even if you did, it would be on-off flickering, not what we saw. The closest answer I've gotten is an obscure Floridian spirit known as the Red Eyes, or Old Red Eye, depending on the tale. Although the details are pretty muddled and it's considered something that was made up recently, the story, depending on the title, goes that the lights are the eyes of a spirit that was either a Native American, the Red Eyes, or an escaped slave conductor along the Underground Railroad, Old Red Eye. They were tasked with helping others of their kind escape, Trail of Tears or slavery, and were a sort of lookout for hostile patrolmen in the area, and were, if they were encountered them, supposed to lure them away or scare them off the trail that was to be used. A last-ditch effort was to kill them, if necessary. Needless to say, the ghost was one of these people who died doing their duty and now haunt the area they died in. And if you don't give them the password, safe word, or gesture, what have you, they get more and more aggressive until eventually they have no choice left but to kill you.